Alright, welcome back. We're going to do just go over some quick components that we need to check to do a cooling system inspection. As far as coolant level, inspect our radiator hoses, make sure the fans are looking good. Just give the system kind of a once-over visual inspection. So first of all, the first thing we're going to do before we touch anything on the cooling system is make sure that it's not under pressure. We're going to do that by squeezing the upper radiator hose. So this system is cool, it's not under pressure. I can feel that by I'm able to squish in this hose. If you feel heat or it's stiff, we want to wait until the system cools off before we remove the radiator cap. Never remove a radiator cap from a hot cooling system. Now we know it's cool. I'm going to go ahead and remove the radiator cap. This is an overflow tank system because the cap is on the radiator or close to it. It's not on a separate tank like you see on a lot of modern vehicles. I can see fluid right at the top, so we should see green at the very tip top of our radiator, which I can see. So we know our coolant level is okay. If not, we need to go ahead and top it off with the correct type of coolant for the vehicle. If you have an expansion tank system where our radiator cap is over here, we're going to be checking the coolant level at the expansion tank, and there's markings on the tank, min and max, hot or cold. We need to get those right in between the markings at the correct level. Next thing we're going to check is our radiator hoses. Make sure the clamps are in good order. The hoses feel good. It's kind of a Goldilocks thing. We want them to be flexible but not spongy, not squishy. And we want them to kind of be springy but not super stiff and hard and cracked. Okay, and check them out visually. Make sure you don't see any cracking of the rubber. There's upper hose and our lower hose. Differences between these, our upper hose is much more susceptible to heat damage because this is where the hot coolant that has just finished picking up heat from the engine is coming out of the engine and to the top of the radiator. Our lower hose is coolant that has just finished cooling off in the radiator and is returning to the engine, to the water pump. So they're two very different conditions for the hoses. This one gets a lot of heat damage, and our lower hose down here a lot of time has grease, oil, and other problems from it being down low in a different environment. Okay, so once we've checked our hoses are something that are a very common failure of cooling systems. These oftentimes are the weak point. So make sure you keep these replaced and in good condition. We don't want to overheat an engine because of a $9 hose failure that ends up causing some deeper, expensive repairs for the vehicle. So next we're going to check the fans. This vehicle is equipped with electric fans. Remember that keep your hands away from these unless our negative battery cable is off or we've disconnected the connector. These can come on at any time. There's our power disconnect switch, so we can go ahead and check our power to the vehicle. I want to check to make sure the shrouds are not damaged or cracked. That's this plastic shield around the outside. Helps direct our airflow through the radiator. And just make sure they spin freely. Next thing we're going to check is our radiator. And that's going to be a visual inspection. It's not always accessible. A lot of times your condenser is sitting right in front of it for your air conditioning system. But we just want to make sure that it's not obstructed. You haven't picked up a grocery bag on the freeway, and so on. Make sure there's no leaks. Look for wet spots down at the bottom of the radiator where it's going to collect. Look for your coolant. Everything should be dry and should be sealed up. We shouldn't see any moisture around this system. The other thing we need to check on our cap is make sure the spring isn't broken, that our pressure valve's working. With a cooling system tester, we can hook this up to a pressure tester and make sure that it's operating at the right pressure. Remember that your rating of your pressure rating for your cooling system is always on your cap. In this case, we can see usually between 12 and 15 psi is our cooling system pressures. So just to give you a quick overview of what we checked. Checked for heat in our radiator hose. We checked our coolant level under the cap. And then we moved to inspecting our hoses. Make sure we check our cooling fans to make sure they're in good order, that nothing is stuck in them or that they've been damaged and made contact with things. If it's a belt drive system, we need to make sure that we inspect the accessory belt to make sure that it does not need to be replaced. There's our lower hose down there and our upper hose. Remember that our thermostat is usually always at where our upper hose connects to the engine, so that is the thermostat housing. Okay, and you can see our engine coolant temperature sensor is that green sensor down there. It looks like it has a small leak of some kind. That's why there's all that corrosion. So that's something we're going to want to look into and possibly replace. You check your overflow tank or your expansion tank depending on which type that you have. That hose does not go there. It's pretty straightforward visual inspection, and then we can get the cooling system pressure tester out and pump it up and make sure that we don't have any leaks. But any signs of leaks are going to usually be at our connections. Our hoses, I mentioned, are our weak points, but we want to look for any wet areas, especially down on lower catch pans. A lot of times that will be where our coolant will pile up, and it will show you that, hey, we have a problem in the system. A lot of times it could be something simple like a crack in a plastic tank that starts dripping down and collecting down under there in our plastic covering. So overall visual inspection of all our cooling system components.